across the water. I came by myself.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Archie Tech Experience. Today we have with us Priority Coach Herman Pryor. We're going to get a little bit into what he does and have him break some stuff down for us. How you doing today, Mr. Pryor?
Lovely, man. It's lovely was such a thing. Yeah, that's me right now.
Yeah. So why don't we talk a little bit about HIP and what services you guys provide?
So HIP Enterprise, it's an incubator. I still like to call it an incubator, but we've been around for about 10 years, a little over 10 years, focusing on the professional development services space as far as consulting and contracting goes in the DC area. Specialties include everything from organizational development consulting, change management, a lot of equity work in terms of organizational equity, people equity, staff development, leadership development, coaching, some executive coaching, you name it. Anything development that deals with the individual within systems and organizations. We like to say get hip, you know?
And you guys like to say empower people, empower people.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's definitely the tagline, but something that we live by. And essentially, what that means is if if I'm empowered, I'm probably going to empower someone else. It's just
Absolutely.
one of those enigmas that happens. But that means that I would need to be empowered correctly, which is something that we focus on trying to do to ensure that our clients and organizations really get the best of what they're paying for, obviously, but obviously the end goal, which is to grow, which is to experience, enhance, their services ultimately, but also the people experience.
And one of those things deals with people equity, right? Could you kind of break that
Absolutely.
down by definition for us?
Sure, sure. So this equity concept, at least the space that I've been in for a while, really came out of when I actually focused my services on coaching, which is self-equity coaching, which is a lane that I like to think that I coined and developed, but it's probably been around for a while. I just probably packaged it and housed it a little better with some structure. But that's essentially helping individuals really tap into the greater themselves. That's their assets, their gifts, their talents that they may be aware of, but they normally are not paired or aligned with the process that helps them extract it in a way that makes it viable, valuable, quantifiable, or pay for service, if you will. And so that concept, I realized, about a decade ago that it wasn't just enough for individuals kind of one-on-one. I really felt that organizations were heading in a way of wanting to be better for their employees, be better for their operation. And I just literally paired that with people, and how I looked at organizational systems. Part of my work coming out of therapy, I'm a former behavioral therapist as well. And part of that work really focused on change and looking at human behavior. And so I just did some marrying of that self-equity concept to like behavioral psychology, people psychology, et cetera, and just, formulated a process of highlighting what I like to call an intersectionality between people equity and organizational equity. People side of equity, helping organizations really focus on their talents, really understanding what they have as assets, and really helping that bridge really come together in the middle, if you will, where the bottom line can meet that business equity and really, really get to, as I like to say, good.
That's good. That's very good. So when you do help someone realize their equity or their self-worth, how do you recommend that they leverage that, like in job interviews or relationships or any type of partnership, really?
Yeah, it's really about really seeing yourself as priority. I think that's the first step from an assessment standpoint of really tying into an extraction, a self extraction, of really pulling out and jotting down, writing down, if you will, like what am I good at? That's a separate box from what is my purpose, or what I think my purpose is. We may not even know. We might still be on the road to that developing phases of what that purpose is. But you do have interests, you do have strengths, you do have talents, you do have things that people say you are great at. You do have things that you put your hand on when you are finished with that product, you feel amazing about. So a lot of that inertia is really tying you to things that make you come alive. And so that's kind of like a step one for me, self-assessment in terms of extracting and identifying and aligning what your strengths, your weaknesses, your ticks, your talents are, putting them down on paper, same old habit, put it down on paper, actually look at that, make sure that you agree with that. Because a lot of times people give us talents. A lot of the times when they see that you can do something well, or you accomplish something better than someone else, and that'll be placed upon you. That might not be your track. That might not be the thing that you speak to or gives you life. So if you can identify first, then you will have a great start in front of that journey of being able to know how to maybe navigate step two.
Understood. And when you go into like a company or organization, what are some things you look for? What stands out the most when you're looking for areas of improvement?
Honestly, I go to the website first. That's my first rule of thumb. That's what hospital, school doesn't matter to me. Your output is really based on what I feel your input is and how you view yourself. And so if you're not someone that prioritizes what messaging you're putting out there, what communication you're putting out there, if your values or your mission says one thing, but that can't be conveyed on the website, for me, that's already a stopgap. And I'm taking notes kind of like at first sight of how do I feel as a potential consumer, or potential partner or potential, business, relationship personnel that might want to do business with this entity. How do I feel? What messaging am I getting? And are you hitting the mark based on, do I feel what you're saying based on the words that you get? Because sometimes that's really all I'm going to get if I'm not looking beyond that website, or if I don't have a contact at the organization that can turn me on or turn me off. So that's kind of like my step one. What picture is the organization painting based on what it may be requesting my services for? Because that goal that they may want may be one thing, but we may uncover some other things because they're not being upfront about what the real issues are.
Yeah. Wow, that's powerful. And when you're dealing with self-worth, I want to kind of backtrack to self-worth. What variables do you take into consideration when you're determining your self-worth?
I think one should take everything into consideration. You hear a lot about nature versus nurture, and my environment. I may be a product of my environment, or I may be a result of the environment I lack. There's so many different cliches, but I think worth is really predicated on how you feel. Because if you take away your job, if you have a family member or kids, you take those away. You take away whether you have money or you don't have money, you take those constructs away. And it's just you, the sun, and the day.
Mm-hmm.
And you're sitting with yourself. And in that moment, I believe that's when you can actually start to ascertain your self worth, because you're thinking about yourself. All you have is yourself. And you may be thinking about goals or aspirations, but you're going to keep going back to how you feel in that moment about the things that you're thinking about. And how you feel is going to really spearhead you to a direction to head somewhere. All right. Based on how you feel, that can be, you may feel depressed because you may not be where you want to be in life. You may feel happy. You may want to do something. You might not have a plan, but you're like excited about putting your energy somewhere. So I always say self-worth is predicated on where you are, which is in turn how you feel. And if you can identify that, you know, emotion or mindset, what have you, then you can start the process of understanding how to start putting together directives or narratives for, again, what that next step may be.
Absolutely. And what are some of the main issues that you think interferes with productivity?
Everything, it's 21st century, man. I mean, I think we live in a time where, unfortunately, and I don't blame anyone, it's just society at this time where we have a lot of stimuli, man. And
Yeah.
it's good because we are a very aggressive society when it comes to technology, when it comes to being ahead of the curve for a lot of things, a lot of information, how we view the world, exposure, etc. But it's sometimes overstimulation, which is, let's use a simple IG, Instagram. If you have certain folks that you're following for certain content, that's all great, right? You're getting your fix, you're getting your affirmations, you're getting your NASDAQ, whatever, because it's helping you build yourself a viewpoint of how you want to see yourselves in the world. But, even that could become cumbersome and overload if you don't have structures around timing with that. Because
Mm-hmm.
again, if you're looking at those things in the morning and maybe midday and at night, you're on a system. And I think that's pretty healthy. But if you have no bandwidth as to the impulses that pull you in to just get on, yeah, you could be getting a lot of content, a lot of information, a lot of development happening, but then it can turn into overload. That's I call that backwards mindfulness. a little bit of not having a focus to the intent, but really just being a part of the combustion. And
Yeah,
it's really doing you in, yeah, and a
yes.
disservice.
Sometimes I'll deactivate most of my social media accounts. I'll just deactivate them for a few days and I start to feel refreshed again, you know?
That's where
So
we are. It's not, and I always say, don't feel bad. You know, don't feel bad if you find yourself like 3 days in, and you're like, "What am I doing?" Because we're human. You know, it's a beautiful thing to have these tools, but it's just always finding back, your lane of healthy. Because again, and it goes back again that self-worth piece of like, where are you? You know, with all the stimuli going, where are you? So that way, how much, how little, on, off, what to unplug, what to plug into. And, it's exhausting a little bit because this is an everyday thing for us in these days and times because we have all of this access. But I think that's where self-conditioning is needed the most, and again, there's nothing wrong with conditioning.
yeah.
We're all hoping to be here till 100 and plus, maybe. But, in doing so and thinking that way, if you're setting yourself up for the long game, you want to have some of these, again, constructs in place and don't think twice about how you may be viewed for those things. Think about your self investment in terms of where you're planning to go, and whatever that village looks like around you, partnering with that maybe so that you get on the same wavelength with those who see the world your way. That's the other beautiful part about it. You're not really alone, even if you are finding ways to sit with yourself. There's still other
Yeah.
people out here that think like you, move like you, but you can't even connect to those supports without really understanding this internal and external valuation that you have for your own space time concepts, purviews, etc.
So it sounds like it all really starts with the self, right? Learning your self-worth, having self-awareness and knowledge of self. And is that one of the things you do? Like when you go in to like look for problems within the company, do you tell these companies that like, let's focus on each individual employee or at least get them to focus on their individual selves? And do you think that inspires productivity and growth?
So organizations are different. So I used to do individual coaching sessions with individuals some time back, and I still do a little bit here and there, but they're two different extremes because one construct is really kind of pulling the lid off of an individual who's at their wits' end almost to want to strategically and seriously invest into themselves. So they're coming to the table, typically in that process, you're already going to get an assessment from me, right? That you complete and you provide me with some information that I have before we even start, jump one session. So I'm going into that knowing where you are. And that's a little bit more vulnerable space that you already agreeing that you want to develop or grow in a certain area, and that's what we're working towards. And maybe then some that we may discover, but that's usually a 50-50 waltz that we're getting ready to enter into together. With an organization, again, I might get invited in for these set uh, asks or requirements, right? But once a therapist, you're always a therapist. So it's like you can see beyond the bullets almost, as I like to say, in terms of what's requested of me, in terms of what I'm seeing, you know. And so that dance gets a little bit more strategic because again, you're wanting to do good business with this organization and you want to be an invited guest and you want to, do a lot of business, hopefully. So you're not going in guns and blazes like, this is crap, even if I see crap. This is still a relationship, and it's the same for individuals. Like, I'm not going to scare you away, session one, because you probably took so much to get here to admit that there's some holes, some voids, So in both scenarios, it's about relationship building and stakeholder management, if you will. The difference is there's one entity that may be coming full force for the support and help that they need, and they're very vulnerable and honest and upfront about that. Usually, with organizations, it's more of a dance to get them to continue to peel back the onion, peel back the onion. The more time you spend there, the more things you see, where you can go into looking at it if it's a people opportunity that you can help build a pyramidal construct around to support the lack of what may be going on there as far as issues, or if it's a leadership deficiency that we need to look at. And again, you don't want to go again tell someone they're crap, but you can, as you're paying attention and assessing, start putting the puzzle pieces together, right? To really be able to, in your assessment, propose where you feel what they've asked for and here's what you've seen, and try to meet in the middle of where to start that development process for the betterment of the organization. And again, getting back to that people equity, organizational equity, and business equity formula. And that's usually like the constructs that I work on. Like I keep it really simple, people or business. That's why we're here, and once I can educate on that, we can kind of decrease, from the other constructs that may be very heightened on where the issues are, but keep it very simple and goal oriented to getting to those outcomes.
Absolutely.
And partnership. That's the key. Keeping partnership in mind because people always want to feel like you're with them instead of against them.
Yeah, that's big. What does it look like when someone steps fully into their power? What does that look like to you?
It looks like you, man.
Oh, I appreciate that.
And that,
Yeah,
we had a conversation before, and I meant what I said about, this is rare that you take an initiative, one, to construct your idea, put it on paper, touch it, make it tangible, but also believing in enough yourself that you want to invite people on, people you may have just met, people you may not even know, but you're that confident in you that what you're trying to do is aligned to a greater purpose, and
yeah,
other folks are aligned to that, and then you make that magic happen. So that's what it looks like, no fear, risk prone, you know, uh, really, I always like to say being willing to travel, you know, that's the biggest thing. Like you're on the journey and it's like pack your bags, let's go. You don't know where you're going. You don't know when you're leaving. You don't
hmm
even know when you're going to get there, but your bag is packed and you're ready.
I came by myself, climbed the highest mountain and many never see.
And that's what it looks like. It looks like fullness. It looks like I'm here. It looks like I don't have anything to lose because I'm starting where I am. I've lost nothing. I only have everything to gain, and trusting yourself. I keep going back to that self-equity piece because most of what you're looking for out there, as far as your successes, your greatness, and all of that, is predicated on you making a split decision in your mind that you're willing and worthy enough to have it,
absolutely, yeah.
instead
That
of you needing, an ounce or two of validation ongoingly. You have the key to unlock the magic that says, "I'm going to go get it."
one of my first challenges was actually realizing my self-worth because I have had problems with undervaluing myself a lot of times. And so realizing my self-worth was a big step for me. And so I try to like find ways as I grow, I like to pour that out to the people around me, try to touch as many people as I can because you never know what you're learning. Somebody else may be at that point where they need to learn the same lesson. So I try to share as I grow.
Yeah, Javon, it's not even a maybe. It is like someone is there. Again, I like in this engagement too, you connecting to some energy out there that I was putting out that
Yeah.
resonated with you. So if you're true to that space, it never turns off, and that's the jewel of it. And, again, to answer that question, it's really about being present in that space, not fearful, not doubting yourself. And you don't even have to be even overconfident. You just have to be willing to be there so
hmm
that whatever force or energy or opportunity is looking for you, because that's the other key to it. When we all have something inside of us that's literally waiting to be not even birth, it's already been birthed. It's just a small seed.
hmm
We got to water it. We got to believe in it. We got to speak life to it. We have to actually put ourselves in environments that the sun and energy in those spaces that is trying to attract those things are pulling it so that we can get to it and it can grow within us to grow from us. I think a lot of folks allude to like there's something in me that I need to birth. And yeah, but the birthing happens already inside of you. Like conception happens inside, you know, the fetus grows inside. there's there's nothing happening on the outside until it's almost full grown. In layman's terms, the baby's not full grown, but it's like it's ready to kind of see the world. And you got to think about your internal light and your gifts that way. Like it should already be brewing you know it's not when it hits society when it's like it's made it's already made
Yeah.
you got to carry that for forever almost until it comes out to the point where it's undeniable. That's what I like to say. So you're not looking for validation. It will just find its own level of respect because it's undeniable. You can't not see it.
Absolutely. It's something that you said to me that really resonated with me. And it was in regard to like losing your job or any type of major change in your life and feeling like it was the end of the world. And I kind of wanted you to explain that a little bit for my viewers, as opposed to like just know, and that also aligns with knowing your self-worth and, you know, being able to pick yourself back up and keep going.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I alluded to a scenario where, as in the same regard of talking about carrying your gift, and knowing that valuation of that gift, at inception almost. So that way
Hmm.
you understand that even though it's not on the level of whoever's, it still has the same light, the same fire, the same impact, literally waiting for the right opportunity to connect to it. And that,
Hmm.
that's how I like to think about myself, in terms of, again, not being risk aversion, but being risk prone. Like, hey, I know at the foundation of me what I'm carrying.
Yeah.
I got the light sticks, I got the gasoline, and I can turn the spigot up and turn the spigot down. And if that's all I know, I'm already ahead of the curve, I feel like. So it's the same way about thinking about the things that we tie ourselves to in terms of title jobs, in terms of monetary gains at certain levels, in terms of our homes, our cars, etc. The things that we align to success, without really understanding the peace in that success, without really understanding the joys of those successes, without really understanding that there's another level of impact beyond the tangible piece of what we're striving for. Because in this society, we are prone to go after the American dream. And I always like to say dream backwards, which means that when you see all of this stuff out there, that again, overstimulation
Hmm.
and access, over access, think about who you would be without those things. So in that same example that I shared, without those things, sitting with yourself, are you still okay with yourself? Because if doomsday happen, you lose your job tomorrow because you haven't lit the match internally with accessing some of those other pockets of you, are you going to be okay? Or are you going to be depressed? Is it doomsday? And I wanted to share that example because I think we set ourselves short all the time without realizing that, if you lost your job tomorrow, guess what's going to happen? Your alter ego is going to kick in. That other person inside you that actually drives you from fear and drives you from doubt, because they're going to turn into a solutionist. And you're not even going to recognize yourself a little bit because it's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to probably sweat some bullets. You're going to
Hmm.
get irritable. You're going to start thinking about like, I'm going to be poor, broke, X, Y. You're going to go to doomsday mentally. And I always say, challenge yourself in those spaces, because that's when you figure out who you are. Not the person you knew or previous trials and tribulations, but tribulations in the day, because those are different from past tribulations. You see what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
you want to be poised and ready for that present day one to bring upon your own solutions and knowing how to move forward so that you don't succumb to things like, heavy depression or suicide, or, just kind of going down a path that is not even warranted the actual activity.
Yeah.
You lost your job. I mean, we want to make money. We want to have things in this world. We want to have, see ourselves as evolving. But again, I go back to the self. If you can identify what makes you and what you can live without, and knowing that space, nothing can shake you. Nothing can shake your faith. Nothing can shake your day. It's almost kind of like, well, there's today. And again, I know that's a really crazy way to think about the world in this society, because we have so much that we're trying to do. We have so many things we see that we want to align ourselves to. But again, I keep going back to the basics. Like, when you can ask yourself, who are you, and answer yourself, or start the process of answering yourself, with or without the things that you think make you who you are. Now we're playing ball. That's now you're turning on the light. Now someone's home.
I think a lot of people might. I think the whole country at this point can identify with that, especially after like when COVID first hit. I know, I know for me, my world was flipped upside down. I really didn't know how I would handle it, but eventually I regained. You know what I'm saying?
Look at you, man.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
see,
yeah.
that's the piece. Like, a little bit of reflection every day goes a long way. I'll say that again. A little bit of reflection every day goes a long way, because we need to always constantly remind ourselves where we've been and where we
Hmm.
aren't anymore. All right. You
Yeah.
saying that one example, that's a perfect example of like you were going through it mentally.
Mhm.
And here you are smiling, seemingly healthy.
Yeah.
you know, like that's the thing. And this is another opportunity, or another hurdle slash opportunity you've gotten past. So if you can knit those things together like knitting a sweater almost in terms of all the trials and tribulations and actually wear those things every day so that you can remind yourself that today is just another day to see and another day to do because you've been somewhere, you know, and here you are too. And
Hmm.
that's it, and if we hold on to those constructs and are grateful for the present and appreciate, where we've been, where we are, and even where we want to go, the days gets a little easier. The stress levels drop a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
You start seeing clarity in what matters to you, and you can start eliminating what doesn't, and really put yourself in a space of, as I like to say, receipt all the time. Whereas you are in expectation, but you expect nothing. I know it sounds crazy.
Yes.
you are you are in anticipation, but you want for nothing. You know, you desire things, but you're content with what you have.
That's a good place to be. That's a very powerful place to be. So what mean it when you fell forward? Could you
Mm.
could you break that down for
You're hitting all the taglines. Yeah, I love it. So,
him?
fail forward is not a new concept. It's been out a while, and I definitely tapped onto the bandwagon some years ago because again, it hit me like when you, let's say, if you start a company and you got these big ideas and you're out of the box with it and it doesn't pick up as quick as you want to, and you feel like, man, like, why did I do that? I should have went about it a different way. We always can get in what it should have, could have, but it's like instead of staying in that mindset and mode of like, man, realizing like, all right, lesson learned. Won't do that again, right?
Yeah.
But it's like taking those decisions that may or may not have been great, taking the drought, taking the lost funds, all of those things, and realizing like I now know what not to do. Right. So now I'm intentionally failing forward because I'm going to replicate that, right? Maybe at a different level, at a different
Hmm.
height, or decrease the intent and effort around that. But failing forward is just kind of like, meaning when you fail forward, it's just like, don't be afraid to learn. Don't be afraid to grow. Particularly in entrepreneurship, it's nothing but risk and
Hmm.
calculations, and the unknown, literally. No matter who you are, how great you are, how much money you can raise, nothing's guaranteed. But that's what I love about it personally, because again, it gives me an opportunity to experience something new. And out of that, meaning what you fail forward, I coined a concept a few years back called waiting well, which means that instead of being when I was in my graduate studies, working on my doctorate, I actually about 5 years in was in a situation where I felt like, all right, comps are done, exams are finished, papers are written. Like, why am I still sitting here? And I'm trying to work with my program to figure out what the constructs, processes, and all that was. And I just felt like I was in a mental rat race because I feel like, I was basing my worth on what I've done versus understanding the quietness of the moment. Because what I was getting ready to get into was a transition in my life, kind of post my program that I had never been in that space before. And it hit me one day that, versus instead of going not crazy, but instead of ruminating in my mind in terms of when the green light would happen, I started realizing like I still got a whole life here. I'm still this whole person, I got a whole family. I got things that I've already done that I can measure my success on, but I really need to do that. And I started getting back to myself. I started getting back to like, going to brunches again, taking care of myself, getting out of the house, getting some fresh air, and putting that in the back of my mind, lack thereof of being something that's tied to my self worth, right? Because it was becoming that because I felt like I worked hard for this thing. But I needed to remind myself kind of like who I was, which in terms of who I was before this program, you know,
Hmm.
I was no short of what I felt amazing of myself, right? So I needed to kind of retrace those steps. And I just got into a calm of like not even thinking about them. Like, they get to me when they get to me, whatever the case is. I know I've done this work, I'm XYZ. And I just started getting into this again, this concept called waiting well. I was okay about being patient because that didn't mean I was anything less than who I already was. This was going to be an addition to the great person that I felt that I already was. And it was kind of like a refinement psychologically on, hey, 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 get out of your head. You're still that dude. This mantle is over you, but you're good. Like, boom. And I just kind of like found myself again, shaved again, I cleaned up, I got it all back together. And it's just like, when we wait well, everything will be waiting for us. When we learn how to be patient beyond patient, right? It's almost like a double negative of positivity. When we learn how to be patient beyond patient, it's like the world opens up to us when it's supposed to, and we're not holding on to lacks or losses or wants or desires. We end up showing up or being aligned to a time period that literally is designated for us. And that's essentially what happened to me. So what I felt was going to be a failure, I learned how to just push past that and realize time will be the deciding factor, right? And in that process, retaught myself how to do patience on top of patience and do that with finesse, not stammer and struggle, but finesse and grace and a smile so that I can arrive whole instead of feeling beaten whenever that day would come.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That, and it takes a lot of resilience to make it through those things and bounce back. Where could people find you?
Man, I'm on all the standard social media platforms. I mean, Instagram is at Dr. _HIP, Facebook, Herman Pryor Jr., Twitter, Dr. Hip as well. I'm on YouTube also. I think you can just search Herman Pryor or have a podcast on there as well, Cornbread, if you want to check some content out on there as well. So I'm out there, man. Folks are usually catching snippets and tidbits because I like to incubate, as I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Not really a full on bobblehead, talking head just yet, if you will, but I like to resonate in what I think and feel and really try to share, verses, if you will, in alignment, at the right time so that people can really get what they need. And in that same process, I'm getting what I need back again, if that makes sense.
Cornbread Fat. Let's talk a little bit about that. What type of topics do you guys discuss over there?
Everything black male oriented, man. We've that was a journey that we went on. We agreed to go on together because we were three black men in the DC area, kind of with three different walks of life, realizing that a greater kind of sounding needed to happen to really showcase what that looked like. We know black men are black men, but I don't think there's enough highlighting, if you will, about the dichotomies of black men, the differentiation of us that makes us great together, and
Mm-hmm.
then there being appreciation about that. And so when we talk about everything, man, we talk about um, black men who are fatherless. We talk about raising families. We talk about being black and educated in the metro area and what that means, the successes of that, the setbacks of that. We talked about code switching, having to really survive in the metropolitan city. Again, as a black man, we talk about
I always put emphasis on code switching. I think it's very
yeah,
necessary. Man,
yeah.
hopefully one day it won't be. I don't, but until we get there, I think code switching is a very
Well,
necessary.
I change the terminology. I don't like the term code switching because I feel like it like deletes the part of self. So I
Mm-hmm.
just kind of I call it transitioning. We're
Yeah.
always in a state of transition, meaning that that's just to me heightened emotional intelligence that you understand where you are and you can place yourself in that environment. So, again, the tagline is code switching, but I like to say showing up as my authentic self for the space that needs me.
And also speaking to people in a way that they can understand, right? Because it's
Exactly.
always important to
Exactly.
reach the audience. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that sounds like a very interesting podcast. Cornbread Fat. I'm definitely gonna go watch it. I did look over some of them, but I'm
Yeah,
definitely
yeah, yeah. It's wholesome, man. It's the concept came about because, I'm from the South originally, Charleston, South Carolina, and been in the DC area about 16, 17 years now. And when I think about cornbread, if you're from the South or you got any relative, who's made cornbread for you or whatever, cornbread is like salty, sweet, and right on time because you only get it when you kind of want it a little bit or you're not eating it every day. At least I
Mhm.
don't know anyone eating cornbread every day, but
Yeah.
when you have it, it's hidden, right? And so we felt like the topics that we could reflect in terms of through the eyes of black men, we could hit, and they probably would hit because there's not a lot of this happening, on a lot of different mainstream platforms where there's a lot of us doing a lot of this where we can kind of break down things and verbalize emotions and, and psychological deficiencies and hurt trauma. I mean, we get into all of that because, again, we wanted to be spaces that showcase that. And again, from three different lenses. One of the guys, pastor, one is a policy dude in DC here working in the government. I'm a consultant, and also a coach, and resonates with both of those spaces. A lot of my clients are in the government. And so it's like, that's really the space, but we're not the same. We don't think the same. We can agree upon petitions that really support or impact us the same way, but we have our own voices. And I think that's part of the uniqueness to doing those 5 seasons that we did do with the podcast, because again, we wanted to show that diversity and be very intentional about that. Be very intentional about showcasing what it looks like to be Black in America, if you will, to be smart, to be seeking and in discovery still, to be a pastor and young, to be young fathers, to be young husbands, if you will, and to have children and trying to still grow and develop and build a business. And we just got down to it because I think we need more authentic faces to represent the pathways, because not all pathways are bad, and not all pathways are not impossible. It's just really being able to tap into these spaces more, and there's a lot of different great ones out there, on social media platforms you're starting to see a peak in Black males really finding their voices and really coming up with really cool concepts. And so I'm excited about the future and what it's going to yield with us having these awakenings and actually being strong enough, mentally, psychologically, eliminating the traumas and things of that nature that comes from just culturally, environments.
Generational as well.
Yeah. We get into that too. we got episodes for a lot of different things that we just pull from reality, and just really wanted to just touch on it because outside of the barbershops, or the church parking lot, it's just kind of like some of these conversations are sacred to us internally. But I think education starts with the willingness to share, and a willingness to teach, and a willingness to be as whole as you can with doing that sharing to connect. And so that's the vibe we hope that we gave off, in the content that we provided. But yeah, it's called Cornbread Podcast. It's on YouTube. Again, we got about 5 seasons of content. We took a little hiatus during the pandemic. Life was lifing. So it definitely needed to take a rest for a second. But I mean, there's a lot of great things and triggers that are raised. But being a therapist, not going too deep in 30 minutes or an hour, but really helping people understand, like, as wounds open, we can get tools to close them, and you do that practice every day to get ahead.
Well, unfortunately, this has been a great conversation with you, a great interview, and I appreciate your time. I have to cut it short, but I'm going to put you in the waiting room and do my outro. Hopefully, we can have more discussions in the future, man.
No doubt. Appreciate the invitation again, man. I look forward to seeing the great things you're going to do, brother.
Absolutely. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. I will be in touch with you for sure.
All right. Sounds good. You too. Take care, man.
Okay, you too. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was Herman Pryor, priority coach and consultant. I hope that you guys liked it. As always, I want you guys to love each other, be kind to each other, take care of each other, but it also starts with yourself. Empower people. I want to give a special shout out today to one of my biggest supporters, one of my biggest motivators, Mr. Carter. I love you, kid. Keep going with me, and let's get this all done.
Why am I questioning the spirit when my spirit already told me what to do? Why am I second guessing my intuition when my intuition always shows me what is true? Why am I seeking guidance when my guide never lied? As within, so without. Look inside. And anyway, why am I so focused on what's to come, when in this present moment, I am who I've become?